Yo, patrons and people of the night, it is your boy BD, and welcome back to the Horror Tavern. Make sure to take a seat and grab a drink as we explore the limitless cavern that is the horror genre. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about my Hall of Fame of horror novels as I go back to explore a short story collection which absolutely wowed me. This short story collection is written by an author that I consider to be nothing short of a genius because this book is fantastic. This short story collection that I read a while ago and made an extensive review on had fantastic world building in it. It was an amazing dark fantasy book. It had some of the most coolest and most badass creature feature stuff in it. It had some of the most disturbing horror material I've ever read in my entire life. And just the lore that you get within this short story collection alone will blow your mind as to how vividly this author is able to paint a picture as to the dark fantasy world he's created, the monsters and entities that live within it, the history behind it, the landscapes of the world. It is all fantastically done. And this book is, at this point in my time of reading horror books, I would rank it as a masterpiece. I, in fact, would say that this is a perfect short story collection. And this might be one of my, probably arguably my favorite short story collection I've ever read. The only one that can compete with this is Stephen King's Night Shift. And I'm going to be talking about Wounds, 6 Stories from the Border of Hell by Nathan Ballingrud. I made an extensive review on this book a while ago, so you can check on my channel for that. I'm not going to be going into anywhere near as much detail in this video. This video is just to highlight why this book is in my Hall of Fame, why it's one of my favorite horror novels of all time, why it's one of my favorite short story collections of all time, and it is underrated as fuck because almost nobody I know has read this book. People are very hesitant to check it out. Nathan Ballingrud has a following, he has a fan base, but he doesn't get as much love as I think he needs. And this dude is literally, in my opinion, a genius. I mean, he's a very humble guy. I've interacted briefly with him on Twitter when I first posted about my review of the video. But this guy is a very good writer. He's a very good horror writer, a very good author, a very imaginative, creative guy. And the stuff that I see in this book is stuff that I've only seen in like some of the best Japanese manga that I've ever read. And the best Japanese manga that I've read, I hold at the upper echelon of like fiction and literary works. So this is an amazing book. So what is this book about? This book, although it's called 6 Stories from the Border of Hell, if you don't like religious horror, don't worry. This is not a religious horror book. Much like what you would see in stuff like The Exorcism and, stories like that, all these different satanic or demon-related exorcism stories. This is not that. Even though this book is called 6 Stories from the Border of Hell, and the world that Nathan Ballingrud focuses on in each of these different anthological stories in the book is revolved around hell. This is not hell like you would know in the Bible or what you would relate to. This is a completely fabricated, completely creative liberty version of hell. It is a dark fantasy world. It's full of amazing creatures, amazing monsters, horrifying stuff, a lot of history, a lot of lore, and on top of that, some of the landscapes in this dark fantasy world of hell is described in the book, specifically towards the last story, and it is fantastic. The stuff that Nathan Ballingrud writes in here is not necessarily stuff that would perturb you if you're a religious person. It is completely fabricated. It is all a giant dark fantasy world that essentially each of the 6 stories in this book are different characters, different locations in the world. Hell, some of them are even different time periods. But they each reveal a little bit more about the lore of hell, Nathan Ballingrud's version of hell. Gives you more insight as to some of the monsters that live there, some of the stuff that's involved within it, and those are the only interconnected parts. Again, different characters, different settings, different time periods, and all 6 of the stories, but each gives you a brief glimpse into the world, and the final story is this giant epic grand finale that feels like you're watching a movie, with how high quality and action packed it is, and it sort of just wraps everything up in like a final closing act that just lets you know, okay, I got a great idea as to the mind of Nathan Ballingrud. And on Twitter, he said that more hell is coming when he replied to my tweet. So maybe he's writing a sequel to this anthology collection. Maybe he's writing a spinoff. Fingers crossed, I hope so, because I'm definitely going to read that. But let me give you a brief insight as to what some of the stuff you can expect within this book. There's 6 stories in this book as labeled by the title. The first story is called, I think, The Atlas from Hell, and this is about basically a black market, I think in Louisiana, where people are selling memorabilia from hell, which basically there's people who manage to find ways to collect items from hell, either through different contacts, or maybe they are venturing within the black magic, the dark arts, or maybe they've somehow visited there in a certain way. Like there will be, let's say, a piece of rock from the landscape of hell, like a rock from hell, a pebble from hell, and it'll be a pebble this big, and yet it'll weigh as much as a fridge. Like it is crazy, some of the physics defying stuff that comes from, you know, this dark fantasy realm. And they'll be selling this for like millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars, making money off of that. And this one guy who's trapped within the crime syndicate, he runs a library, ends up having to retrieve a piece of memorabilia called the Atlas from Hell. He thinks it may be a book that deals with like dark magic or something, and he has to unfortunately go to, I think, the Louisiana Bayou, or like some type of Everglades Bayou thing, down to this ramshackle kind of area where this crackhead essentially has stolen this memorabilia and kept it there. And when he gets to this shack, oh boy, it's not what he expected. The Atlas from Hell is in fact not a book. It is a helmet with a skull inside of it. And this helmet with the skull inside of it belonged to a dead monk. A dead monk from hell. That's right. So in this book, there is a common aspect of hell, which is that there are certain monks of the Black Iron Shrine, I think is what it's called, who essentially, you know, you have monks who follow Buddhism, you have monks who follow, you know, other religions. There are monks that follow hell, and essentially they have to do a contract where they have to then live on the outskirts of hell, in these shrines, and they try to study the architecture, the geography of the hell world, try to figure out about some of the creatures, some of the languages there. They're essentially like archaeologists or cartographers or linguists of hell. However, of course, they cannot enter the world of hell under normal circumstances. First, they have to take a binding vow, and then they have to wear these helmets. They are these square metal boxes that make these guys kind of look like astronauts. And the reason why they have to wear these boxes with chains on them over their hands and over their heads is because when you enter the world of hell, on the outskirts you're fine, but when you go deeper into the world, there is this language of hell, this vibration, this symphony, there's this frequency that essentially drives you into madness. It causes you to go crazy. You'll start harming yourself. You'll start killing others, committing homicide, atrocities once you listen to this frequency. And this helmet protects you. So in turn, these monks are completely trapped in darkness. They cannot see anything. They cannot hear anything. They cannot see anything. They cannot experience any of the 5 senses to this world. Yet somehow, according to this binding vow, they have this like extraordinary sense where they can just navigate worlds, and we are completely oblivious as to how they do it. So the Atlas from Hell is the helmet of one of these monks who died, and his skull is in there, and it causes chants. That's right, this dead skull with the box in it emits frequencies and chants that were inherently, I guess, learned by the guy when he was studying in hell, and it essentially starts driving people into madness. And furthermore, it starts bringing creatures from hell into the real world. There is like some Resident Evil 7 level boss creatures that get leaked out into the bayou. Very horrifying stuff. People start transforming, their bodies start transforming and shifting because every time basically this crackhead brings out a new piece of memorabilia from hell. As he does it, a creature or entity ends up becoming brought forth as well, because the memorabilia items that he asked for to sell are brought to him by these creatures or entities. And of course, they give him the object, he's able to sell it, but then these creatures have nowhere to go, so they start going out into Earth and doing God knows what. Very cool story. The second story is about this, I think it's called The Diabolist. It's about this guy in this local town who is basically shunned. He's like this urban legend, this outcast who's shunned by society. He's this guy who practices Satanism. He practices black magic, and he does it because his wife died, and he loved his wife when she passed away. He wanted to find a way to bring her back, and he started dabbling within black magic and the dark arts to hopefully bring her back. However, he was unsuccessful, and instead he brought back an imp, a demon from hell, and he managed to capture it, put it within like a containment center in his house, in the basement. And when his daughter is basically left by herself after he passes away, she then is shunned by society. She's basically an outcast. And one day she goes down to the basement and sees the imp, and they start kind of bonding with each other. They start discussing philosophy with each other. The imp kind of gives her some lore behind the world that he comes from. She starts giving some lore about the human world and what she's dealt with. And you start seeing this imp start learning about human nature and human weaknesses and how society works, compared to where he comes from, where all imps and demons are kind of like servants, slaves. They all work in these mills, and they all do certain things for, obviously, their majesty. Here in the human world, people have choice, people have freedom, and they decide to instead work under their own principles, and that can end up being bad. So there's very much symbolism, themes of human nature within this very well-written story, and I'm quite a big fan of it. So that's the second story. The third story, I think, is called Skull Pocket, which is a weird one. It's about essentially this local town, I think in Maine, who essentially has entered into a binding vow with these ghouls. There are these ghouls, these ghoul children who existed like many, many years ago. And these ghoul children used to basically exit from the local graveyard in the town and start feeding upon humans and creatures just for food. And one day they stumbled upon a carnival. And when they stumbled upon this carnival, they essentially saw like they saw all this wondrous things, all this fun that people were having, and these ghoul children wanted to become a part of it. However, when they entered the carnival, obviously people freaked out, people shunned them, people tried getting rid of them. They saw like circus freak shows and stuff, which made them very uncomfortable that people would just discriminate like that. But they wanted to enjoy the human world, so they decided to enter within a basically like contract where they would protect this town from being destroyed by Leviathan. You never find out what Leviathan actually is, but it's hinted to be this giant kaiju monster that would come from the sea and destroy the town of Maine. These ghouls made a binding vow that they would protect the city, protect the town from this Leviathan creature, as long as they would be able to live in the human world and enjoy the facilities like, again, amusement parks, have fun, create religion, and do stuff like that. So that's what that story is about. It's a very odd one, very weird, very strange. There is some graphic imagery in there, some disgusting imagery in there. I don't fully understand the story even after it, but it was pretty fun and interesting enough. So even the weakest story in this book is still quite creative, quite well done. The fourth story in here is called, I forgot the name of it. I forgot the name of it. But essentially it's about this suburb town who got invaded by these monsters. These monsters all of a sudden one day showed up in this town, and they were nicknamed by the people surgeons. And they are basically these giant 8-9 foot tall, skinny, pale, humanoid, decrepit, skeleton type creatures. Imagine the Rake. Have you ever read about the creepypasta The Rake, or what's called pale skin crawlers? That's essentially what these creatures are. They're these 9 foot tall, giant Rake, Wendigo, pale skin crawler things that walk around the city. And they're called surgeons because they collect humans and turn them into art. And their version of art is getting hundreds of people or hundreds of corpses and sewing them and knitting them together into giant tapestries of human flesh, heads, bodies, and then putting that tapestry all across the town and decorating it. And these creatures may or may not try to create a portal to hell in the town and allow more surgeons to come through, more creatures to come through, potentially some type of monster or something. And this girl, who's essentially been a survivor of this event, helps people get out of this town, tries to help survivors, and she helps this one man. But this one man ends up realizing that he left behind his best friend in the town, which happens to be his dog. And the girl's like, I'm not going to help you get back your dog. There's no way. But he's had nobody in his life. He's been very lonely. All of his loved ones have died. He's been very much to himself. But this dog has always been by his side, and he wants to get him back. And eventually the girl succumbs and tries to help him get back his best friend. And again, it is a very disturbing, intense, horrific story. It feels like something straight out of Bloodborne. If you ever played the video game Bloodborne, a lot of the scenery and setting is kind of like that. So if you're a fan of that, you're going to like the story. The fifth story in this book is called The Visible Filth, which is about a Louisiana bartender who ends up having has a barroom fight that breaks out one day. And this barroom fight ends up causing these college kids to flee after these guys have finished brawling each other. And one of the kids leaves behind a phone in the bar. And obviously the guy is waiting. He assumes the kid's going to come back the next day to get it. So he takes the phone home with him. And as he does, he has a difficult situation with his girlfriend back at the apartment he lives in. He kind of thinks about debauchery and cheating on her, and he's not really satisfied with her. He thinks that she's not that satisfied with him either. And all of a sudden on the phone, he starts getting these text messages. These very strange text messages from an anonymous number where the guy is saying that he feels like he senses a presence in the room with him. There's something in his apartment with him, and it's stalking him, and it might do some harm to him. And the guy kind of thinks it's weird and freaks out. He thinks it might be an elaborate prank. And then as the days go on, nobody comes to collect his phone again. And one day he gets a text message, assumably from this college kid, who basically says to him, open up the camera roll and see what's in there. You might find a surprise. And he opens up the camera roll, and I brought up that scene in my Scariest Scenes from Horror Books video, so go check that out. But essentially it has to do with a ritual that may or may not involve a decapitated head with a star-shaped hole cut into the scalp. And these college kids are assumably recording it on a dining table, and they start chanting something in an incoherent language. And all of a sudden, this pale hand emerges from the star-shaped hole in the head of the decapitated head, and these abnormally long pale fingers, 9-inch long pale fingers, grip the head and pull it back. And all of a sudden the kids start screaming, and you find out that this ritual involves birthing a certain monster, a certain creature from hell. And it is disgusting, it is disturbing, it is so creepy, and this is easily the most scariest, eeriest story in the entire book. The final story in the book is called The Butcher's Table. It is in fact the longest one. It is a 100-page or so novella, and it's about this satanic worshiper. He's a part of this cult, who ends up wanting to marry the daughter of a cannibal priest. There is this cannibal priest in the world who is extremely wealthy, extremely rich. He runs this kind of underground cult thing, this secret society. And his daughter is, again, basically royalty. He's very rich. And basically once a year or once every 5 years or something, he hosts this annual feast where, using certain rituals, using certain creatures, using certain methods, the cult and this satanic organization is able to essentially unite together and go dine in hell. They venture into the outskirts of hell, and they host this giant feast where they invite the satanic majesty himself to dine with them. And essentially they pick a person to basically have a cannibal feast. That's right. They basically find a victim, take them, prepare them into food, and basically cannibalize that guy and do it in the name of the overlord of the underworld. And this takes place during the pirate era. So this is basically Pirates of the Caribbean meets hell, because in order to get to hell, they have to recruit these pirates, and these pirates get aboard these ships. They start sailing across these dark, stormy waters, and they start preparing to open up the portal to go into hell, which is essentially like this meridian in the sea that you can cross over. But it's not without difficulty, because they start encountering a lot of wild shit and wild creatures. Specifically, there's these creatures called carrion angels that are these 8 to 9 foot tall vulture slash crow like humanoids. Essentially, imagine like a vulture mixed with a witch. That's what these creatures are. They have these long beaks with these jagged, sharp canines. They have these tendrils that emerge from their heads. They have these like dark, raggedy clothes on them. And they have these pure red eyes that burn like fire red coals with smoke coming out of it. And they essentially attack these pirate towns, these towns that are across like these pirate bays, and they start killing people and eating corpses and stuff. And these 4 angels have a very disturbing power, and that is when they they will essentially attack a victim. They will burrow a hole into the body using their beaks, and then they can turn into this smoke form and enter that crevice. And when they enter that crevice, they can possess that person. And when they possess it, because their entity is emerging into the body will start falling apart and breaking to fit the soul of the carrion angel, which means your skin will start ripping open, your bones will start contorting, you will basically start breaking apart, your neck will snap at odd angles, your limbs will break, and again, your chest will break open, and dark feathers will seep out of those opening and holes, and you'll look like this disturbing marionette puppet as this carrion angel starts possessing your body, and it'll start affecting your vocal cords. You'll start screeching out its voice. Very disturbing stuff. And it's not just humans they can affect all types of living creatures. You'll see how that plays out in the story. And there's even a scene where they have to, in order to get to hell, these pirates and the cult and the priest have to recruit a monk. You know that monk I brought up in the first story, the monks of hell from the Black Iron Shrine? They have to recruit one. And this is how this monk shows up. This is the most badass introduction I've ever seen of a villain. They essentially are crossing into the meridian, which leads to the outskirts of hell. And they start noticing that the water looks different. It's like all black. There's storms constantly. And they look ahead, and there is this mountain-sized head sticking out of the water. A mountain-sized face and head is sticking out of the water, and it's all black. It's got a mouth of all pure white teeth, and it has these giant white eyes with no pupils, just straight white eyes, like my shirt. This giant all black mountain-sized head, giant grinning white teeth, and all black eyes. And what happens is it also has tentacles for hair. So this thing looks like a giant pure black silhouette of Cthulhu. And I'm like, what the fuck? And this thing opens up its mouth and rolls out this 100-foot long tongue like a red carpet. And as this tongue starts, and basically this head starts propelling through the water and goes right in front of this pirate ship, it dwarfs this pirate ship. I mean, if this is the pirate ship, this head looks like my body. Like if I stood up right now, this is how big the head is compared to the pirate ship. And when this tongue rolls out all the way to the stern of the boat, there is the black iron monk standing on top of the tip of the tongue, just hands crossed, perfectly straight, not even moving. And as soon as the tongue rolls out, he just steps off the tongue, gets on top of the ship, and then this tongue goes back into this giant, humongous head, and this head then submerges into the deep black abyss of the ocean. And they start realizing the head was the size of a mountain. How big was the body? And are there an entire society or multiple creatures of this size under the water, right basically under our feet right now? It is the most amazing just world building stuff in this book. The creatures, you get the landscape of hell. When they enter hell in this story, it's described that there's this giant mountain, which is essentially the body of a fallen angel. It is this humongous kaiju-sized angel that has died. It's like a giant seraphim. You know those seraphim with like the multiple eyes that look freaky as shit from the Bible? It's this giant dead seraphim. And there's this hole in her chest. And the hole in her chest is basically leading up to this waterfall that you can climb up with the ship and go into. Basically, the hole in the chest is the opening to this giant cave. It is so dope. And mind you, these are just the outskirts of hell. This is not the entire, world of hell. It's described by Nathan Ballingrud that, there's more than meets the eye. And you can only survive in the outskirts, because if you go deeper into the world, you'll basically instantly go into madness, or God knows what lives there will just instantly take you out. This book is fantastic. Amazing world building, amazing setting. I was absolutely shocked by how good it is, and I recommend all of you check it out. This is a fucking masterpiece. It is so amazing, and if what I said hasn't impressed you, I don't know what else I can do. This video wasn't even supposed to be 26 minutes long, and yet it's 26 minutes long. So sorry about the video running long, but I just want to give you, again, a brief glimpse into the story, and that's all I have for today. This is in my Hall of Fame, one of the best short story collections I've ever read, one of the best horror books I've ever read. Please go read it, and please go support Nathan Ballingrud. That's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and deuces. Hall of Fame, people. You can trust me on that. Just please go check it out. It's worth your time.